To get started on this exercise, download the Custom Buttons folder and locate the Custom Buttons template inside of that folder. With this template, we're going to be creating a variety of different custom-made buttons and applying the style to all of the different shapes within it. So to get started, let's go into Illustrator, go up to File, and create our new document. Now, since the artwork that we're creating is going to be viewed on screen, we need to choose either mobile or web. When you choose these presets, this will set up your document appropriate to save your work so that it can be viewed on screen. If you look over in the details of it, make sure you're working in pixels as your unit of measure. The size of our document is going to be 800 by 800 pixels, so it'll be nice and square. We really don't need any kind of bleed setting, but if we open our advanced options, make sure you're working in RGB color mode, but change your raster effects from screen to high. This way, whenever we save our documents or create output for the artwork that we create, it'll be nice and high for modern resolution screens. The final thing we can do is to scroll to the top, and let's give this document the name of Custom Buttons. Be sure to add your name at the end of that. With that done, we can hit Create. Once your document is created, let's also make sure we've got some appropriate panels open up for this exercise. I've opened up my Appearance panel, my Swatches panel. You're going to need the Transparency and also the Gradient panel. I've dragged each one of those off and I've docked them together so I can quickly and easily find that. The next thing we need to do is to place that template into our document. So let's go up to File and down to Place. Locate the Custom Buttons folder and select that template JPEG. Make sure to check on Template, and when you hit Place, this will place the artwork into your Illustrator document on its own template layer. Now I need to move it over, so let's also go to our Layers panel. I'm going to unlock that bottom template so I can click on it, and let's center it up inside of our document. Once you've got it nice and centered, you can return to your layers, lock it down, and all of the work we're going to do will be in layer 1. So we can just select that and actually close out our layers because we're not going to need that in the future. The next thing we need to do is to trace off each of the different shapes that you see here. And we can do this using a variety of different tools, and most of them are going to be very obvious. So for starters, if we need the ellipse, let's go to our pre-made shapes, choose the ellipse tool. And remember, to get a perfect circle, I'm going to hold down the Shift key and click and drag. And if I need to reposition it, hold down the space bar and remove it until it fits nicely into place. Now for now, the color of our shapes won't really matter, so I'm going to make mine black just so I can see that. I've got fill of black with a stroke of none. Below it, we need to choose the Polygon Tool. As with the other one, you can click and drag and hold down the space bar. Since I've already got 5 sides loaded up, it's going to make, or excuse me, 6 sides, it's going to make a nice 6-sided polygon. But if you need to, you can either hit your up or down arrows to add or remove the number of sides as necessary. Simply hit your space bar, drag it into place until you get it about the right size. If it's off by a little bit, that's okay. Below that, we've also got a rounded rectangle. As with the other ones, I can click and drag and then move it up into place. Now, if the corners of your rounded rectangle are still off, you can use your up and down arrows to increase or decrease the roundedness of that size until it fits nicely into there. Beside that, we've got a regular square, so I'm going to hold down Shift and click and drag till I get that. Looks like I won't need the Shift. Now for this one, it's a rounded rectangle, but only 2 of the opposite corners are rounded. So for this one, I'm going to keep my square and click and drag till I get the size that I need. Once I'm done with that, to round it off, I've got my corner widgets turned on. If you don't see your corner widgets, you can go up to View and down to Show Corner Widget. In our case, Show Corner Widgets already turned on, so we can see those. But to round over just one corner, I'm going to choose my white arrow tool. Then when I go down and select just one of the edges, notice I only get one corner widget. Now I can click and drag and then bring it up until it matches that curve perfectly. Let's do the same for this side. Click and drag in and then bring it down until it matches the curve as you see fit. It should be around 100 pixels, and so that's good enough for that one. Going back up to the top, I'm going to choose my rectangle tool again. For this one's really easy. We can click and drag. The one below can either use a rectangle or a rounded rectangle. I'm going to choose my rectangle since I've already got it handy. But for this one, I'm just going to click on the corner widgets. Since they're all selected, they'll all move at the same time, and that'll pull it in nice and easily. And this final one, this is a little bit more of an amorphous shape. I may have to use my pen tool in order to draw this one off. If you haven't used the pen tool in a while, remember you can start off with one point and click and drag to get a Bezier curve. With that, you notice you get a little curve, and so you can click and drag until you get the curve that you want. Remember, as with the other ones, you can click and drag around until you get the curve that matches nicely with the points that you have. Again, if it's off by a little bit, that's okay. I'm just trying to get the basic shape once it's finished. Now that we're done, this is a good point to go up to File and save what we're working on and continue on. Since I've got it already saved as CustomButtons as an Illustrator file, I'll hit Save and keep that Illustrator file and say OK to the options. Now let's have fun and actually start creating one of the styles for the buttons. We're only going to work on these one at a time, so I'm going to zoom in to the circle at the very top. With that, I'm going to select my circle, so I've got it highlighted, and let's go into our Swatches panel. With the swatches, of course, you've got some predefined colors, gradients, and even some patterns. But if you ever want to find more of these, at the very bottom left-hand corner, there's a Swatches library menu. When you click on this menu, you get a pop-out, and you can see a variety of pre-made, pre-ordered swatches. The ones we're going to be working on will be in the gradients, and I want you to choose the brights. With brights, you can see it'll open up its own panel, and you've got a predefined set of bright colors you can pick and choose from. Additionally, you can click on the little arrows and move to some other predefined color swatches as well, but just make sure we work on brights for this one. I want you to select just one of the colors that are pre-made. For my example, I'm going to click on the green one. Notice that when you click on the green one, if you look in the Swatches panel, it'll automatically add that bright swatch you selected to the bottom of the swatches that we have here. And this will work for any time that you click on a swatch on this. What I want to do is to modify this gradient just slightly. If we open our gradient panel, notice at the very bottom you've got three different stops to this gradient. You've got a lighter, a medium, and kind of a darker one. I want to make this lighter one slightly lighter. I think it's too dark. So I'm going to double click on the swatch. This will open up my color picker, and I'm going to move each of the stops slightly to the right to lighten it up. Another good tip is if you hold down the Shift key, it'll move all of them proportionally at the same time. So that'll move it closer to white, and that lightens it up just slightly. Let's do the same thing for the darker one and make it darker. So double click on the gradient swatch. By the way, I'm working in the first little color picker, not in the swatches picker. With this one, let's pull it down closer to the darker end, and I'm even going to make mine slightly more blue. So this way it gives it a little bit more of a contrast between the highlights and the dark areas. Once you've got the colors the way you want to, return to your Swatches panel. Let's create a new swatch that has that new gradient we created. It's going to ask you to give it a name. We'll just say OK. And now notice that you've got the better new swatch loaded into there. Now let's adjust our gradient. Returning to our gradient panel, change the type from linear to radial. When you do this, and especially if you've got your circle selected, notice now it goes from the central point outward. You can also adjust where this central point is and how much you want it to expand. To do this, choose the Gradient tool. It's located towards the center of your toolbox. When you have this, you'll notice the little gradient slider is now inside of the area, and you can click and drag and readjust the central point to where it will start and stop. So what I want to do is I'm going to bring it up and slightly to the left so that it looks a little bit more like a sphere. If you need to readjust the point from here, you can also click on the edge and drag it inward to adjust the starting and stopping point. Or you can click on the central point and either move it around or readjust where the center of it is from there. I like to keep it right there because it looks like it's a sphere now. It's got a central point and getting rounded as it moves off to the edge. Once you get something that you like, now is a good saving point. So I'm going to go to File and Save and move on. And now comes a tricky part. I'm going to choose my regular selection tool and make sure my circle is selected. In the Appearance panel, if I was to expand it out so we can see all that's inside of it, you'll notice that it has the stroke and the fill color for the object we have selected. And if you want, you can collapse or expand the options that are underneath it. I'm going to select my fill color and add a second fill color to it. So with the fill selected, click on the bottom left-hand corner, this second icon, Add New Fill. We'll copy the existing fill and we've got it on top of this. So now we actually have two fill colors, one on top of the other, and in this case they happen to be exactly the same, that central fill gradient, radial gradient that we have. Let's change this topmost fill to a different kind of gradient. This kind of gradient will add a dark edge border around it. So returning to our Brights color panel, let's click the left hand until we find the Vignettes. There they are. So the Vignettes will add a circular or radial vignette to it. And the one we want to add is the lens vignette. It's towards the center and it looks like this. So when I click it, notice now in my Appearance panel it adds that second fill vignette. And if you see our gradient panel, this is what the gradient looks like. You can see it has transparency moving to a dark and just a slight outer white rim. Now it doesn't look very spectacular right now. This is because it's adding that vignette offset to our circle. So now we need to choose our gradient tool and reset it to the center of our circle. So to do this, I'm going to click on the central point and then drag out all the way to the edge. And when I let go, this will recenter up our little vignette gradient. The other thing we need to do is to return to our Appearance panel, open up the fill options for this vignette, and click on the opacity of it. With the opacity, we can change up the blending mode. Let's set it from normal to overlay, and you can see how this will take that color and blend it in with the colors that are below it. Now it's starting to look like a really cool, fun button inside of just this shape. Again, this is a good saving point, so we'll go to File and save up what we have. And again, we can go back to our Appearance panel and you can close out the fill to make it a little bit easier to see what we have. Just know that we've got two different fills now, a vignette fill on top of a solid radial fill, but there still should be no stroke. Now let's add a double border to our button. Again, with your circle selected, let's return to our Appearance panel. Notice that you have a stroke layer. Let's click on this stroke layer anywhere that doesn't have any options to it and drag it below both of the fill layers. So now our stroke is behind the fills that we have. If we click on the stroke color options, let's go down to our options to choose the fill colors for the vignette. Let's click to the left and go back till we find the metals. Again, they're in alphabetical order, and here's our metal. We want to apply one of these metal gradients to our stroke. So with the stroke swatch selected, there we are, choose the silver or steel. I'm going to choose steel as my stroke color swatch. Next, in our appearance panel, let's increase the size of it to be 18 points. When I hit return, you can see this adds a gradient overlay of that metal gradient to our over outline. And because it's behind our fill colors, it fills it in very nicely. Now, as with our fill colors, we want to have a second stroke. So let's go back to our appearance, select the stroke layer. Now let's add a new stroke to it. So one click will add a second stroke on top of this one. This stroke will still have the steel, but let's change the size of it from 18 down to 8 points. Also, with the stroke selected, let's have it going the opposite direction. Because it's the same stroke, this is why we can't see it. So I'm going to return to my gradient layer and change the angle of it from 0 to 180. When I do this, you can now see that inner stroke because it's going the opposite direction of what we have before. Now we've got the essence of a button that we can work with and apply that style to the other shapes. Now, to save this as a style that we can apply to other objects, we need to open up our Graphic Styles panel. If you don't see it on the right-hand side, you can go to Window and down to Graphic Styles, and this will open up that panel. I'm going to drag it off so we can see it, and we won't really need any more of these, so I'll close out our gradients that we've used. Within Graphic Styles, let's select our circular object, and when you click to create a new one at the bottom right-hand corner, this will save a copy of that style down here. What it's saving within this style is both of the fills and the strokes that are automatically applied to this object. This means if I were to select another object or create another object, let's do this now. Say I choose another ellipse. You can see how it remembered the last one, but I can go to my graphic style, click on it, and automatically it can be applied to that particular shape. Let's try it now with our polygon. I'll select my polygon, choose the graphic style that we created. You can see how it automatically applies it to here. Now, when we do this, you can see there's an issue with this one. This worked well having a round style inside of a rounded object, but since this one has some straight edges, we need to clean it up just a little bit. So with the style selected, we can go to our appearance panel and let's choose the appropriate layer that we need to adjust. In this case, I really think it's just the topmost fill for the vignette. With that fill selected, we can now choose our gradient tool, and let's readjust this gradient so that it's larger and fills up the entire area. That looks much, much better. If necessary, I could resave this as a different style, or I could just keep it as the starting point for this one. I'm going to keep it for there. Let's go up to our rectangular ones and see if we can do the same for this one. Choose the topmost rectangle, apply this new style. Now for this one, since there really is no roundedness to its shape, we really need to change the type of gradient that we have. So for this one, with our rectangle selected, we'll go to our vignette fill and then down to our gradient panel and change the type from radial to linear. Notice now that this will go from one edge to another. Let's do the same thing for the second fill. This will give us our green fill that's underneath. Again, we can keep it radial, but if we choose linear, this will have it go from one side to the other. Now for this one, especially since it's nice and horizontal, I'm even going to change the angle of this one from 0 degrees. Let's rotate it 90 degrees, and it'll give me this kind of effect. You may need to go in and readjust your other gradient fills appropriately for each of the things that you've chosen. So if I set that to 90 degrees, but that would look much more appropriate than having a rounded one. If you've got a nice long one like I have here, we can save this up as a graphic style too. So with one click, we'll go into our graphic styles, and now I've got both a rounded one and a linear one. Let's apply each of the styles to the different remaining shapes. So So select this one. We'll do a radial one, or excuse me, a linear one. This one could go either way. Here's what it looks like having radial. Here's linear. I kind of like the linear one a little bit better. For our squares at the bottom, this is radial. I like that one. So let's choose our fill, and I'm going to get my fill tool and readjust the size until it fills that one out nicely. For our regular square at the bottom, that one looks appropriate. And for our little leaf-like structure, let's see what a radial one looks like for this one. The main purpose of doing this is that it gives us the ability to adjust and customize the look and feel of all of our gradients and add a little bit more spontaneity than just having a solid fill or a solid color that we're working with. Try that one more time with this one. We'll drag it out a little bit farther and readjust the central point for it. And there we have it. Can back out. Now this next step is to take the realism of these buttons one step further by adding some ultra shiny highlights to one or both of the edges within the objects. Now for this step, there's a lot of artistic license that you can take. So what I'm about to show you is simply my method of doing this, but it does take a little bit of playing around until you get the results that you like. Let's take it one object at a time. For my circle, since the overall shape of my circle is using that circular ellipse, we're going to use that tool to draw off just a simple white circle. So I'm going to set my fill color back to white, and I'm going to set my stroke to none. I'm going to click and drag off a circle that's a little bit smaller than the circle we currently have. So something like that. Then I'm going to make a copy of this circle. Hold down Option when you click and drag, and you've got one circle on top of the other. Notice that I've offset it just a little bit so that it is down and slightly to the right. When I select both of these circles, I can then use my Shape Builder tool, this tool right here, and hold down Option to erase away the bottom portion of the front circle. This will leave me with this kind of crescent moon shape. This is going to be the base of the shape for my highlight. With that, I can choose my selection tool, my black arrow again. I'm going to kind of move it up to the top corner. Now, since this is going to be a highlight, we want it to kind of fade in to the existing colors that are below it. So to do this, we're going to turn this into a basic white gradient. Let's return to our Swatches panel and locate the black to white gradient. It should look like this now. Now let's go down to our gradient panel. Instead of going white to black, double click on your black swatch and set that color to be white. So essentially it's going to go from white to white. But this swatch is going to be 100% transparent. So set your opacity down to 0. Now check out what we have. We have it going from white, fading into whatever color we have down at the bottom. From here, you can use your gradient tool and change up the direction of it. So if I click and drag towards the center, since the highlight is coming up here, notice now that it fits nicely and flows well inside of there. Let's take it one step further. Once we've got our gradient established, we can go to our transparency panel and change your blending mode to overlay so that we'll overlay on top of it. If you've got a light source that's very bright and on top of a shiny surface, this will have a nice hard edge to it. And you can readjust the outline or the size accordingly. However, if the surface of your button is a little bit more matte, so it's a little bit rougher, you can select your object and let's feather out the edges. If we go up to Effect, down to Stylize, and choose Feather, when you turn on Preview, you can get an idea of what that feathering effect will look like, and this gives it a nice soft edge. Again, the lower the number, the harder the edge you'll have, and the shinier the surface, but if you feather it more, it'll give it a much smoother matte finish. I like to have something around 8 to 10 pixels. We'll say OK to that. Notice now I've got a nice little highlight that I can move around and readjust whatever looks appropriately. If I wanted to, I could make a copy of this, hold down Option, and rotate it all the way around 180 degrees and place it on the bottom as well. Now I've got a highlight almost shining through the entire thing. To take it one step further, if you still think your highlight is too much, you can always go to your transparency panel and adjust the opacity, bringing it down until you get it to where you want. That looks much, much better. Now we do have to do this for each of the buttons, and each of the buttons is going to be slightly different based on its shape. So to help us out, let's select the little highlight shape that we have and save that as a graphic style as well. Go to our graphics panel, click Create New, and this will save that up as that highlight, getting all of the shadows, the feathering, and even the transparency blending mode. Let's go over to this rectangular one. Now for this one, I could create a rectangular shape that follows along the edge of this, but I could also freeform it a little bit better. I'm going to choose my pen tool this time. I'm going to click on the top corner, and this time I'm going to drag out something that looks a little bit more of an S-curve on the inside of it. So I'll click and drag until I get something that looks like this. Go back to the center. I'll fill it in with solid white so you can see it. This is the shape that I created. Because it's going through the center and it has this nice little freeform curve, when I apply the effect to it, this is what I get. Remember, if you get the effect and it looks slightly different, you can always change it up by going to your appearance panel. In my case, if I want my fill color to be slightly more or less, I can choose Fill, grab my gradient, let's click and drag so that the gradient fills in more of the area. That looks better. If I needed to drop the opacity, I can go to my transparency panel and change up the opacity. And I can also change the blending mode to overlay. That will blend in the colors with it a little bit better. Actually, I like the opacity being a little bit higher. The final thing is if I need to adjust my feather, rather than returning back to the effect, I can go to my appearance panel and click on the word feather, and this will open up the feathering options from here. Just make sure you've got preview turned on so you can see it and work with it. So repeat this process for each of the different icons that you have, changing up the blending mode and applying some sort of highlight to each of the ones once they're created. The final thing we want to do to this exercise is to make copies of all of our buttons and give them a variety of different colors. And this process is actually going to be easier than recreating all of them. I'll close out my graphic styles because we won't need them. I'm going to zoom out so I can see my entire artboard. We want to copy the artboard and everything on it. So to do this, choose your artboard tool in your toolbox. Go up to the options at the very top and make sure the Move Copy Artwork with Artboard is checked on. When you do this, you can click and hold your Option key, and when you drag, it will copy the artboard and all of the contents onto it. Let's make 5 total copies. If you need to, you can back out so you can see everything. Hold down Option, click and drag. So there's 3, here's 4, and here's 5. The placement and arrangement of them won't really matter for now. Once we're done copying them, you can choose your selection tool again. Let's zoom into this second artboard. To change the color of your buttons, click and drag over all of the artwork on that artboard, so just those are selected. At the very top in your control panel, look for the Recolor Artwork icon. One click of that will open up the Recolor Artwork artboard, and this will give you an idea of all the different colors it takes to create the artwork that you have selected. If you click on the word Edit, then go down to the very bottom and click on the little Link Harmonies. This will allow all of your colors to be linked together. You can see where they appear on your color wheel. So when you click and drag, you can drag it to a different spot on your color wheel. Since I've got recolor artwork turned on, you can see how this will automatically recolor all of the artwork that we have. Choose 5 different color harmonies to recolor all of your buttons. Since I've got yellow here, we've already got it saved. We'll say OK to that, and automatically they're recolored. Let's do the same for the third one. Select all 3 of these, click on the Recolor Artwork, choose Edit, and then link together all of your color harmonies at the bottom. Dragging around, let's see if we can get more of a reddish harmony. That looks good. Say OK. Let's choose our 4th one, all of the artwork that's on there. Recolor the artwork, choose Edit, link them together. Let's make these more of a dark blue or a lightish blue. If you do want to lighten your artwork, you can click on the slider at the bottom, and this will either darken or lighten based on the color wheel you have. Once you got something, you can say OK. And let's do more of a violet purple for this 5th one. Select Recolor, choose Edit, link them all together, and drag it around to the purple. In this case, I'm going to lighten it up. Yeah, it's dark. Yeah, let's lighten it up just a little bit. And say OK to that. Once you've got the 5 color harmonies selected for all of your different buttons, finally go up to File and save it, and upload just this Illustrator file to Moodle for this exercise grade.